Liz Bishop here.
And Deborah Costa. We're with Heffernan Insurance Brokers, and we're here with our second webinar in partnership with the Napa Valley Vintners Association. We are live at Spotswood Winery.
Yes, and we're going to be able to talk with the CEO today of Spotswood, who's going to tell us why she leaned in specifically with this particular wildfire contractor and how she protected herself against ember wash, even though she's on the valley floor. And a lot of wineries don't think that you're at risk, but the truth is that we are all at risk if you are in fact on the valley floor from ember wash. So we're excited to bring you the specific products that are very, I think, competitively priced, right, Deb?
Yeah.
That will really help your winery prepare for wildfire in 21.
And we're excited to have you with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, so we're here today with Beth Novak-Milliken, who's the CEO and president of Spotswood Winery. And Beth, we were hoping that you could enlighten us a little bit on your aha moment as to why you realized you needed wildfire mitigation equipment for the winery.
So it was truly an aha moment. We're here on the valley floor, we're right in the town of St. Helena actually, and we are surrounded by vineyards, so one would think that we were safe. Having said that, I was with a photographer from the New York Times who's a man that also is the main photographer for their wildfire coverage here in California. And so we were chatting as we were walking around the property, and he noted that he had been on site at the Soda Rock Winery up in Alexander Valley when the Kincaid fire, I believe it was burning. And he was there with some firefighters, and an ember, he communicated to me that an ember came in, they were there, the winery started on fire, and they basically had to walk away, they had to drive away because they couldn't stay to use their resources to protect that person's property, because of course you have to go take care of life and that sort of loss before you take care of a building. So that was a moment when I said, wow, I mean, we're really on our own, and we are not safe in the middle of the valley. It doesn't matter if you're surrounded by vineyards, it's all about embers. So I reached out to a person who works with us as our architect when we do projects. And I said, you know, we need to look at what our options might be here. So she came up with, she gave us the name of Ember Defense, was one of them for protecting our eaves, protecting our gutters, leaves and gutters, all that sort of thing. And then there was also something for a water mitigation system that was extremely expensive. For us, the Ember Defense proposal was just a no-brainer, not only here for our winery, but also for our estate home, which is my family home, which is the image and everything that is Spotswood. It's a beautiful old home that was built in the late 1800s, and we're simply not willing to lose it to fire if we can avoid it. For us, the main reason is, right, we have to protect ourselves here, even though we are in the city limits of St. Helena. Also, right behind me is our second-year barrel room. It was the 19th pre-prohibition winery in Napa County, so it also has up in the eaves and everything, although it's a stone building, there is old, beautiful redwood. And then our first-year barrel room is on the other side of us here. So at any given time, we have 2 full vintages of our estate Cabernet Sauvignon here on site. If we were to lose that to fire, we would not be able, we would have 2 full years where we did not have wine to sell. That would be a financial hit that we are simply not willing to take or don't want to take. So for us, it was a very simple decision, and Ember Defense gave us a proposal, came in and did the job, did it beautifully. You guys came in, I think they were working from like 7 a.m. until 6 p.m. every day, and
Absolutely.
You were in and out in 5 days, and you had your fabrication thing over there, but you also had, you know, you'd already created the vents and everything, so we've done everything that we can do here to protect ourselves.
Great job.
Hi, my name is Devin LeBlanc, co-founder of Ember Defense, a Marine Corps veteran and mechanical engineer. One of my passions is helping people and problem solving. And when you look at the wildfire threat today, it is just getting worse and worse every single year. And where I wanted to, and where I thought I could actually fit in, was helping the individual homeowner, identifying what they need to do specifically with their properties and their homes to give them a fighting chance with this problem. So I've taken it upon myself and our team. We've dived in and are just helping anybody we can and educating. All right, let's talk about home hardening, what that is. You're going to hear that term more and more. And what it is it's actually looking at the property itself and the structure. In years past, you've heard defensible space, that's been driven into us. That's all you could do to protect yourself from a wildfire. But unfortunately, there's been far too many losses to really been able to dive in and understand what's going on. Why are we losing structures? Why is it a fire coming through and burning one home, leaving two standing, burning another structure, and going through a neighborhood or across a city? And because of those losses, they've been able to, the industry experts have been able to understand why. And so let's talk about home hardening specifically. Home hardening and its priorities. Let's look at an individual property and understand what's the biggest threats and work your way down. So starting with roof and roof edge, your attic and crawl space vents, and defensible space. So let's break those into 1A, 1B, and 1C. Those are the biggest threats, and then you look into decks. You've got windows, eaves, siding, and we're going to dive into each one of those and understand, is there something you can do on each one of those and how you can protect yourself to a fire.
Okay, so when we're first looking at a property just like this, the first things that come to mind initially is look at the trees. It's a big fire risk, right? They've got to go. They're up against the house. There's just a whole lot going on here. But you really got to understand what a fire does when it works its way around a property. Look at the ladder fuels. These trees here, nicely limbed up. They're not down to the ground. There's no vegetation below it to act as that ladder fuel to come up, burn, and then get into the canopy. A fire's not likely just going to travel its way up the base of these trees.
So they don't have to remove these trees, you know?
No, it's keeping in mind during fire season what the trees do, dropping that debris, those leaves that pile up in the valleys, in the gutters. Cover them with a gutter guard, eliminates that as being a threat. The debris that piles up with the winds, anywhere where debris likes to collect because of winds are the same places that embers like to nestle into during a wildfire. So it's that from the ground up to the siding, we want to see that non-combust. We want to see the foundation underneath there. So if it does happen to catch, it's less likely to jump to the siding.
All right, so the roof and roof edge. Starting, let's look at the roof materials. Is it a Class A roof? That's the most important thing when you're looking at a roof. It's a big ember catcher. So identifying the features on a roof. You've got a valley potentially that's just filled with debris. That's butted up against another vertical wall, maybe on a second story. Thinking of that roof as a big ember catcher. That collects right in where that debris likes to land. That ignites, that fine fuel, it's called kindling, ignites and butted up against a vertical wall and ignites that siding. So regular maintenance with a Class A roof it completely eliminates that as being a real threat. Then you go into the roof edge. This is your gutter line. You could have that Class A roof, you could have brick siding, but if your gutters are full of debris, kindling, we'll call it again, embers collect in that gutter and igniting your fascia on fire. So there's things you can do to prevent that from happening. Okay, so eliminating your gutters as being a threat, it's solvable. Simply putting a all metal gutter guard over your top, you clean them out, and it eliminates that as being an entire threat. We're still seeing foam that's out there being placed in gutters in this wildland urban interface, and it needs to go. It still collects the debris inside. It just has no place for homes in that wildland urban interface. So put a gutter guard on it, eliminates that as being a threat. Your attic and crawl space vents, one of the biggest threats for your homes. We're still in that category 1 of your priorities of what you need to do. So all sorts of different styles, your roof vents, your under eave vents, gable vents, foundation vents, and it's another big ember catcher. Embers blow right in, drop inside your attic into a dry tinder box. So what can you do? Let's look at the solutions. Okay, what can you do to protect your vents? Simply retrofit with an ember and fire rated vent. It's building code now as of 2016 for this to be installed on any new construction house, but prior to that, you can retrofit your vents to be up to code, even up to building codes. So it's the same vents we just talked about. The gable vents, the dormer vents on top, eave vents, foundation vents, retrofit with an ember and fireproof vent, and then it completely eliminates that as being a problem. Let's look at a Vulcan vent. From the outside, doesn't look like any other typical gable vent, but the technology behind it lies on the backside. So, the biggest threat, as we talked about, is embers. A fine mesh screen blocks embers, completely eliminates that as being a threat. If you have that radiant heat threat, that vegetation, that tree that might catch fire next to your home, well, if you see, that honeycomb has a special coating, an intumescent coating that swells shut at around 400 degrees and blocks out heat and flames from entering into your attic, into your crawl space, and eliminates that as being a threat. So that's a Vulcan vent.
Hey Devin, tell me about this building. How could this rock building be subject to fire?
That's a great question. And when you look at it at first thought, how could it burn? You know, it's rock. It's not going to burn. This is non-flammable. But when you really look into the details of it, eave vents, it's one of the biggest weak points. If you look underneath the eave, it's a long strip. That's a vent. And what that does is embers blow right inside, right into that dried tinderbox and ignite from the inside. So gutters, debris builds up. There's a tree on the backside. That debris builds up in the gutters and ignites the fascia on fire, and your roof's on fire. Yes, it is a metal roof, but it could still ignite. So what did we do? We retrofitted with an ember and fireproof vent, and it becomes a little bit more difficult when you look at such a gorgeous building like this, built in the late 1800s. So it's a balance between aesthetically pleasing but still being effective and fire safe. So having to go with a copper vent and copper gutter guards that's going to patina and look aesthetically pleasing, matching the existing gutters and downspouts. So that's probably one of the biggest challenges, but now that we've taken care of the vents all the way around and added gutter guards onto it, that's no longer a threat, and you're set.
So Devin, tell us about these cupola vents and how you ended up kind of working it out so that you had the appropriate fire protection kind of on the backside, but still looks the same as it had in the past. Can you tell us about how you did that?
Yeah, absolutely. So starting, the cupola vent it's a big ember catcher up there. You can see the louvers they cross. That does wind-driven embers blow right inside and drop into the attic and ignite from the inside. So an easy retrofit. We cut out the existing louvered vent, reinserted a ember and fireproof vent. Doesn't look any different than it did before, so it maintains that aesthetic appeal, and while still being protective. We did all three of these, so 12 total vents, and then there's eave vents as well, 2-inch little circles underneath the eaves. Yep. So you've got eave vents that go underneath all the way around, cupola vents as kind of that exit vent, and so retrofitting both completely eliminates vents as being a threat.
Defensible space, specifically 0 to 5 feet out from your structure or your home. So that's the most critical zone. If there's anything you can do, it's that zone 0 to really focus in on. There's ladder fields, wicking fields, looking at what kind of ground cover you might have, the vegetation specifically beneath windows. You start incorporating your siding, I'll get into, decks. All of this kind of looks at that zone 0, that's 0 to 5 feet. So what can you do? Let's talk about solutions. So solutions to that 0 to 5 threat, that zone 0 threat, it's really, it's education. It's understanding, being fire-wise, understanding what kind of vegetation and plants you may be putting in there. Ideally, you want that to be a non-combustible zone from that wall out. We don't want to see combustibles. There are some fire-wise things you can do. And then you start really bringing into, okay, what kind of siding you have, what kind of decks you have, how are those built, what kind of windows you have. So we're going to look at each one of these and focus in on from that structure out.
So Devin, tell me about I'm looking at some fine netting?
Yep.
Or screen?
It's a mesh screen
Yeah.
behind this lattice work. So The biggest risks with the deck is all the debris that just accumulates over time, but because it's usually behind a latticework or somewhat enclosed, that debris piles up, you don't see it. You know, the gardeners, landscapers come through, blow that debris in the back. It's not a big problem aesthetically, but it's a big fire risk. So one thing we did here was added a stainless steel mesh screen to the backside, cleaned it out beforehand, all the debris that was piled up over the years, cleaned it out, added that screen, that mesh, and now the debris that continues to pile up can't get through that screen. It still breathes, but we eliminate that debris underneath as being the kindling and a fire threat.
Yeah, and this is pretty common, isn't it? And inexpensive?
Absolutely. Inexpensive, easy thing to do from the backside. You can't tell, so aesthetically pleasing, you really can't see it. And it eliminates that as being another fire risk.
Okay, decks, let's look at those specifically. What you can do to eliminate that as being a threat. I'll be honest, they are tricky. They're a big ember catcher as well. You've got the debris that builds up underneath. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind. You don't see it, so it's not something you may notice, but all that debris that likes to pile up underneath it, those embers drop into the same place, ignite that fine fuel, then ignite your deck on fire from underneath. One simple solution is clean it out and enclose it. It could be simply with a screen. You could do some sort of lattice work. You can actually fully box it in and eliminates that debris underneath from being a threat. Looking at proper board spacing. Do you get debris built up in between the boards? That debris catches that ember, that ignites the board on fire. You've got the deck board, how it mounts to the structure underneath. There's things you can do. You can put a non-combustible, it could be sheet metal, bitumen tape, on that top rail where the board sits, your top board, and that eliminates an ember from being a threat to igniting. Okay, let's look at siding and what you can do. So, back to that zone 0. Your siding, your defensible space, incorporate that too of what kind of dictates then how risky your siding is. If you've got hardy board, that's one of the best things you can do to withstand heat. You could look at what kind of that zone 0 again. Do you have a bark, a flammable material that is butted up against the house? We like to see from the siding down to the ground at least 6 inches. So if you do happen to get some debris that blows in, some of these areas, the pine needles and debris just drop consistently. It's difficult to keep up on. Wind blows it into the nooks and crannies. But having that non-combustible between the ground and the siding is extremely important. It could be a relatively low-moving, creeping fire that's not that dangerous. But if you lead that fire to your house and then it's butted up against that flammable debris is butted right at the base of your siding that's flammable, that ignites your siding on fire. But there's a few things you really got to look at. Also, radiant heat threads. Do you have a fence line that's right close to your siding? Is it could be your neighbor, could be that vegetation that maybe you couldn't remove in that 5 feet or 5 to 30 feet. That really identifies if your siding is a true threat, or should you be focusing on putting your efforts into other areas of the property. Okay, let's talk about equipment. What else you can do to give yourself another layer of defense. One of them is sprinkler systems. So that might be, there's multiple different levels of sprinkler systems, all the way up to auto-activated. You don't need to be home. It'll identify that fire that's approaching and auto start. There's more cost-effective solutions that are down to just a few $100s. That maybe it's that deck that is just very difficult for you to protect, and simply putting a little bit of water on there could be all you need to eliminate your deck as being an actual threat. So identifying what is a sprinkler system that might work for you and maybe within your budget is something to consider. Another solution, another tool in your tool bag is fire gels. Barricade fire gel is one that comes to mind. It can be applied, and it has to be applied ahead of a fire. So you got to start weighing the options of, do I need to evacuate? Do you know where the fire is? How much time do you have? But that's another tool. It can be hooked up to a garden hose and applied to vertical surfaces. Your vegetation starts giving that thermal barrier as well. That vegetation, the decks, all the other weak points we talked about, your siding, your windows, it's a good solution for giving you another layer of defense. Okay, frost check. You've probably seen the big red cloud that dumps out of air tankers during a wildfire. There's a similar product that is built for the homeowner. It's clear, you can't see it, and it can be applied at the beginning of a fire season to that vegetation, to that 0 to 5 feet that I talked about earlier, and it just reduces that likelihood of ignition from an ember starting that little fine fuels or that shrub, that bush on fire. So just another tool to consider in your circumstances is frost check.
All right, so Adam and Devin, I know that a lot of wineries just aesthetically want to have, some vegetation around their buildings, right? You don't want to have all rock and cactus like I'm sure CAL FIRE would like you to have. So how do you end up protecting that vegetation and having it be able to be staying there, but at the same time not creating a fire risk?
We have a simple product for this, actually. It's called Barricade Fire Gel.
Okay.
And what Barricade Fire Gel does is you can simply hook this onto a standard garden hose, and it hooks into this container.
Okay.
And you turn this on, and you just spray, and it comes out like a mayonnaise texture. So it can stick on vertical surfaces, it can go right onto the vegetation. And what it does is it creates a heat barrier, so it just can't ignite.
How long does that last, or like when should you apply it? I mean, what's kind of the standard?
So it lasts roughly 7 to 12 hours unhydrated.
So before you evacuate?
Correct. Yeah, homeowners should definitely apply this before they evacuate. Don't stay behind.
So this would be a perfect example behind us here, where you want to keep those vines. I mean, that's part of the appeal of a winery like this. But it is a significant fire risk. You could apply this. Wouldn't take long. Wouldn't take but maybe a gallon here to take care of that and eliminate it as being a risk.
Correct. And if you rehydrate it, it lasts longer.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. All right.
Just another tool.
Yeah, very good.
Okay, Fire Boss. It's a portable sprinkler, ideal for property owners and homeowners that have large properties. It's a fast deployable sprinkler that can be laid out. You can string multiple of these large agricultural sprinklers together, and gives it that wall of water. So if you're in that particular situation where you are backed up to large timber, where it could be a canopy fire, it's an ideal product. You string these out, you turn them on, you're putting out hundreds of gallons an hour out, and it significantly increases the relative humidity, drops that ambient temperature, and prevents ignition. So it's something to consider.
So tell us about the Fire Boss, and I know it's critical right now because from an insurance standpoint, insurance companies are pulling back and they're taking out coverage for the vineyard above ground infrastructure. So all this irrigation system, these PVC pipes, these lines that feed the vines are not going to be covered by insurance. And this Fire Boss is amazing. We want to know more about it and what it can do and how easily it is to maneuver it.
Well, the amazing part about the Fire Boss is it's completely mobile. So it weighs about 25 pounds. You can put several of them.
I could pick it up.
Absolutely. Yeah, go
Try
ahead and pick that up. Give it a try.
Oh my gosh.
All right.
I'm
Yeah,
strong.
easy.
So you can have a pickup bed of these running around, and they can actually deploy these rather quickly with a dedicated water source that's strategically placed all around the vineyards or structures.
And how many feet does this one system shoot?
Yeah, so each Fire Boss specifically is roughly 100 feet in each direction, so you're covering a 300-foot diameter. I mean, you're reaching a long way in each direction. You start pairing multiple of these in line together, and now you're putting that wall of water down that might have protected maybe the infrastructure, as an example, on the hillside right here. As that fire crept through, it got real close to the vineyard, and putting the piping and the grapes at risk. So you could line up 3 or 4 of these in line and just lay down that wall of water and protect that vineyard.
And do it in the moment.
In the moment. So, and being mobile, that's where, okay, wind shifts, maybe that's not the side of the vineyard that's really at risk. Let's move them to the other side and put up that wall of water again relatively quickly and protect that side.
And how many dedicated gallons of water would you need to run one system?
Well, the more the better, but I'd like to see roughly 15,000 gallons or more.
Okay.
So
Per system or?
per system, so the more water you have, the longer it's going to run.
I think
More-
too, the most important thing to remember is this can be expanded. You can use one sprinkler or you can use 10. So that all depends on how many sprinklers you actually need.
So you could feed off 10 different fire vases with 15,000 gallons?
Correct. Imagine just
Yeah.
running one
Oh,
line.
so just shoot up more.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah, just
a
take
big-
one
bring a
big
build a
long
wall.
line of sprinklers
Mhm.
strategically placed and all hooked in with lay flat hose. And you can turn off one, end it one that way. You can do a closed loop. Several different ways to do it.
And how does that work with the property? Because sometimes I think increasing the humidity and dampening, you know, any of the land in essence and the trees and shrubs next to the winery or the houses, the housing for their workers or the estate itself. How do you do that without kind of, you know, putting maybe too much water on the property?
That's a good
What are
question.
your thoughts?
Well, so it actually doesn't take as much water as you think to stop spot fires from happening.
Okay.
So it's actually very little. If you think about a pile of leaves, if I spray them with a garden hose, I can't ignite them. But if I try and ignite them and they're dry, they go really quick. Now trying to extinguish that with water,
Right.
it's a little harder to do.
Yeah.
So same principle here. It takes quite a bit of water, but it also goes long distances. So you can go around a whole property. Really what you want to see is the structures harden so you don't have to focus the water on necessarily the structures, more the vegetation.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just literally if I create a wall of fire around your
Your
property,
precious vineyards,
already
yeah.
have, you know, everything hardscaped on the inside with the vents and gutters and everything else, and then you should be pretty solid.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And a lot of vineyards too, as they saw in recent fires, I mean the staff's behind, they're trying to help out, put out spot fires. This just helps them to set it and move on and
Right.
just keep them safe.
That's right, yeah, so you don't have as many, either your employees or CAL FIRE or whoever is trying to come and kind of save your property. They're just not at risk because you've already got your firemen here.
Exactly.
Correct.
And these are readily available, the Firebuzz systems?
They are.
Yeah, so
Yep.
it's
They're made in Canada. Our
Okay.
partner's located in Canada. They are actively using them in Canada. That's their biggest supply of them, and all their local fire departments and
Okay,
forestry
so-
departments are using them in Canada.
Yeah,
So we brought them down to the United States. We're actually their U.S. distributor, so we can definitely get you some fire buses.
great. So I think we all remember how scary it was when the glass fire was raging and how quickly it kind of moved up Highway 29. And just really from the wind and that, I know what, fire creates its own wind, right? And it actually pushed with embers and the like, which we know is our biggest risk in a fire actually. It came over to the mountainside and hillside over here, and it's actually less than a half a mile from this Spotswood property, right?
It's wind-driven embers. I mean, jumping a valley through here that you would think is impossible. It's separated by vineyards. That's a great fire break.
Yeah.
But that's a long way to jump over this valley, and if I remember right, it was still burning fields throughout, even in the middle of the valley.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
wasn't it just like a couple of hours?
Just a couple hours.
I mean, yeah.
And then a few hours after that, it was into Santa Rosa.
That's right.
So, and that's wind-driven embers being that big threat and just hopping its way ahead.
Thank you for joining us today, and thank you Spotswood Winery and Napa Valley Vintners Association. We know there were some great takeaways.
Yeah, there were. I think everybody learned a lot more about how vents, gutters, as well as decking guards can really hardscape and protect your property. We also learned about specific equipment like that fire bars that can create that wall of fire that can really help you from ember wash and create more humidity on your property as well as water that will end up really protecting you and creating that little, fire protection circle around you. And that's exactly what we want. Whether or not you have a bad neighbor or not, you're not going to be at risk any longer. We also learned a little bit more about how that gel can actually protect your property right before you evacuate. So again, thank you for joining us. If by chance you didn't catch our first session with the private firefighter, you can check that on hefins.com. and go to heflearning.com and you'll be able to see that private interview on how you can actually move through your property and reduce the foliage and reduce the number of trees and shrubs that could actually keep your winery standing.